You stayed, you tried, you gave everything you had left to give, and somehow they still made you feel unreasonable for wanting basic love back. Here's something nobody warns you about when you're dealing with someone avoidant. They do not suddenly start valuing you just because you were patient. They do not wake up one morning and think, this person has been so understanding, let me finally show up for them. That is not how this works. There's one thing, just one, that actually flips the power balance with someone avoidant. And most people never do it because they're too afraid of losing whatever small amount of connection they still have left. But here's the truth you already know underneath the fear. You are already losing it. You've been losing it slowly, quietly for months, maybe years. The real question was never whether you'll lose this. The question is whether you walk away with your dignity intact or without it. Stick with me for the next while, because by the time we're through here, you're going to understand exactly what's happening inside the mind of someone avoidant. Why walking away isn't just an emotional reaction, but a genuinely psychological shift, and how to actually do it in a way that serves you, not them. Let me paint you a picture. You're in something with someone. Maybe it's a relationship in the traditional sense. Maybe it's more of a situationship. Maybe it's something in between that doesn't even have a clean name yet. And this person, they aren't cold all the time. That's exactly what makes the whole thing so disorienting. Sometimes they're warm, sometimes they're fully present with you, sometimes they make you feel like you're the only person in the room. And then without any warning, they pull back, they go quiet, they turn distant, and naturally you reach out. You check in, you ask if everything's okay, you try to bridge whatever gap just opened up, and the more you reach toward them, the further away they drift. Does any of this sound familiar? That cycle, that push and pull, that hot and cold rhythm, none of it is coincidence. It's a deeply rooted pattern that lives inside what's often called an avoidant attachment style. And understanding it isn't about slapping a label on someone or diagnosing an entire relationship. It's about understanding the actual mechanics of what's happening so you can finally stop being blindsided by it every time. Here's what someone avoidant is experiencing underneath all of it, at the core level. Connection itself feels dangerous to them, not in some abstract intellectual sense, but deep in their nervous system, in a place that reacts before thought even gets involved. Closeness triggers real anxiety. Vulnerability registers as a genuine threat. Depending on another person feels to their nervous system like handing a weapon over to someone who could use it against them. This isn't something they consciously chose one day. It got built into them, usually way back in childhood, usually through experiences where needing someone led to disappointment, rejection, or emotional unavailability from the exact people who were supposed to love them the most. So what did they learn from all of that? They learned to protect themselves. They learned to keep everyone at arm's length. They learned that staying just a little detached meant they couldn't get hurt again. And over years of practice, they got remarkably good at it. Now here's where things get complicated for you specifically, because you show up warm, you show up caring, you show up emotionally available and consistent. And at first, that's genuinely appealing to someone avoidant. Here's someone safe, they think, someone who won't run off, someone who gives generously and doesn't ask for much in return. But then something quietly starts to shift underneath the surface. The more you care, the more threatening that care starts to feel to them. Because the more you care, the more power you actually hold to hurt them if things ever went wrong. And instead of leaning into that vulnerability, their whole system does exactly what it's been trained to do. It retreats. So they pull back and you move closer. They pull back further and you try even harder. And somewhere inside that cycle, you slowly lost yourself. You started measuring your entire worth by how they responded to you on any given day. You started quietly editing who you are to make yourself more comfortable for them to be around. You started shrinking piece by piece without even fully noticing. And here's the tragic part. The more you shrank, the less they actually respected whatever was left standing in front of them. This is the hardest truth in all of this. Avoidant people do not respect doormat energy. They are not moved by how much you're willing to sacrifice for them. They are not impressed by how patiently you're willing to wait around. In fact, the more consistently available you make yourself, the less valuable you start to register on their nervous system. Not because you actually are less valuable, you're not, but because anything that's always there, always accessible, always accommodating, eventually stops registering as precious. It starts to feel more like furniture, and nobody fights to hold on to furniture. You become the safe option, and safe to someone avoidant essentially means unthreatening, and unthreatening means they never feel any real urgency to step up, show up, or actually do anything differently at all. This is exactly why walking away works. Not as some clever tactic, not as a game, not as manipulation dressed up as self-respect. It works as a reality check for their entire nervous system. The moment you actually walk away, something unprecedented happens inside the mind of someone avoidant. The thing they always feared but could never quite name out loud, actually losing you, suddenly becomes real instead of hypothetical. And real loss registers completely differently than imagined closeness ever did. Imagined closeness was always the threat in their mind. Actual, tangible loss is the wake-up call. But here's what most people get completely wrong about walking away. They think it's fundamentally about sending a message to the other person. It isn't. It's about building a life that doesn't need that person in order to feel whole and full on its own terms. It's about reclaiming yourself so completely that whether they eventually come back or not becomes a secondary question entirely. The real primary question becomes, do I actually still want them back at all? Let me walk you through this carefully, because walking away is genuinely a process, not a single dramatic moment. It is not a big dramatic exit speech delivered for effect. It is not one final text engineered to make them feel guilty enough to chase you. It is not silence you're secretly hoping they'll be the one to break. Real walking away has several distinct layers, and most people skip right past the most important ones without even realizing it. The first layer is clarity. Before you go anywhere at all, you have to get brutally clear on what you've actually been living inside of. Not the highlight reel version, not the good days you keep replaying in your head, the full, honest picture, the actual pattern underneath everything. How long has this dynamic been going on? How many times have you brought up the exact same need, only to have it ignored or half addressed? How many times have you been promised real change that never actually arrived? How many nights have you cried yourself to sleep wondering what was wrong with you, when nothing was ever wrong with you at all? You need to sit with the real, unfiltered version of this relationship, not the version you keep hoping it becomes, but the one it actually is right now. This part is genuinely painful. It's supposed to be, because clarity often hurts before it heals anything. But you cannot walk away from something you're still quietly telling yourself a comforting story about. You have to see the whole thing clearly before your feet can actually move toward the door. So many people, and this matters because so many of you have lived in exactly this place, have been conditioned for years to believe that if you just love someone hard enough, if you're just patient enough, they'll eventually come around on their own. You've been told in 100 subtle ways that your love is the thing capable of saving them, that your consistency is exactly what they need to finally heal, that if you just hold on a little longer, the breakthrough is right around the corner. I want to say this gently but clearly. That story is costing you actual years of your one life. That story is the exact thing keeping you stuck in something that isn't working and calling it hope instead of naming it honestly. Hope is a genuinely beautiful thing to hold on to. But hope without any actual evidence behind it isn't really hope. It's a different flavor of avoidance. It's you avoiding the truth of what this situation actually is, dressed up in gentler language. So the first thing you do is stop repeating the story to yourself that isn't backed up by consistent reality, and instead you start cataloging what's actually real behavior, real patterns, the real honest frequency of genuine connection versus long stretches of distance. You look at the evidence the way a detective would, without any emotional spin attached, just the plain facts as they actually happened. And often, once you do that exercise honestly, the whole picture becomes remarkably clear, remarkably fast. The second layer is decision. Once you've achieved real clarity, you make a decision, not a threat, a decision. There's a massive difference. A threat sounds like, if you don't change, I'm leaving. A decision sounds like, I am leaving, full stop. One is still fundamentally about them, the other is entirely about you. And this is exactly where most people fall apart, because making a real decision means genuinely accepting that you might lose this person completely. It means sitting with the grief of that possibility before it's even happened. It means choosing yourself, even when some desperate part of you is still aching to choose them instead. This matters even more because avoidant people are extraordinarily perceptive about energy, whether they'd admit it or not. They read people well. That's partly how they've survived emotionally for this long. They can sense, almost instinctively, when you're issuing an ultimatum versus when you're genuinely done. They can feel whether there's still some hook left inside you that they could pull on. And if there is a hook, they will pull it every time. So the decision has to be real. It cannot be strategic. It cannot be a performance stage for an audience of one. It cannot be you quietly hoping they'll stop you right at the door. It has to be a genuine arrival at the place where you know, in your bones, that you're worth more than whatever this has become. Walking away only has real power when it comes from self-respect, not desperation. Leaving out of desperation is driven by the hope that the other person will change, while leaving from self-worth is a calm decision to choose your own well-being. Quiet confidence and healthy boundaries are far more powerful than pleading or trying to convince someone to stay. They've seen you shut down completely and come crawling back anyway. But they have never seen you simply quietly decide that you matter more to yourself than their comfort does. And that stops them cold in a way nothing else ever has. Not always immediately, though. Sometimes there's a real delay before anything shifts. Sometimes the avoidant person just lets you go, and there's a long stretch of silence afterward. You might be sitting in exactly that silence right now, and it is genuinely brutal. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. The silence that follows leaving someone avoidant is one of the loneliest feelings there is, because you spent so long working to get close to them, and now the distance feels absolute. But here's what's actually happening on their side during that silence. Remember, the avoidant person's real fear was never commitment itself. Their fear is losing themselves inside a connection. Their fear is vulnerability. Their fear is need itself, the terrifying feeling of actually needing another human being. But when you leave, you literally remove the exact thing that was triggering all of that fear. You remove the pressure. You remove the closeness that was registering to them as a threat. And in the absence of that perceived threat, their attachment system starts doing something genuinely new. It starts missing you without any accompanying fear, because you are no longer registering as a threat to their independence. You exercised your own independence instead, and the irony in that is almost too poetic. The exact moment you stop needing them tends to be the moment they start needing you. Not always, but often enough that this pattern is well documented and instantly recognized by nearly everyone who has ever loved someone avoidant. But here's where you genuinely have to be iron-willed with yourself, because when they do come back, and they often do, they will not come back with a parade. They will not show up with some grand sweeping gesture. They'll come back subtly instead. A text that seems completely casual on the surface, a comment left on an old photo, a check-in that's deliberately innocent enough to give them a clean exit if you respond in a way they don't like. They're testing the water. They're dipping a single toe back in while keeping one foot firmly planted near the exit, just in case. What do you do instead? You match their energy. Calm, interested but never urgent, present but never desperate. That response is disorienting for someone avoidant in the best possible way, because they came back expecting the version of you that needed them. Instead, they find someone genuinely doing fine on her own, warm, but clearly not waiting, with a life that looks full without them in it. That's magnetic to an avoidant because now you register as safe again, not because you're endlessly available, but because you're actually whole. Now I want to talk honestly about the part that happens right after you walk away, the part nobody properly prepares you for. You are going to second guess yourself deeply, probably multiple times a day, especially in the beginning. You're going to replay every good moment and wonder whether you gave up too soon. You're going to get one of those casual texts out of nowhere and feel your whole body light up like Christmas morning. You're going to hear a certain song or catch a familiar smell and suddenly miss them so intensely it feels physical. None of this is a sign that you made a mistake. This is grief, and grief is not evidence that you should go back. Grief is simply evidence that you genuinely loved something real. That's allowed. That's human. It doesn't mean the decision was wrong. What genuinely helps here is practicing radical honesty with yourself. Every time your mind starts spinning that familiar story, maybe if I'd just been more patient, you have to gently bring yourself back to the pattern, not the isolated moments. The consistent, repeating, documented pattern of what this relationship actually looked like over time. Our minds are remarkably skilled at selectively pulling out the moments that support whatever story we're hoping to believe. And withdrawal from someone avoidant genuinely feels like withdrawal because the intermittent reinforcement they gave you is neurologically similar to gambling addiction. Your brain will go hunting for reasons to go back and hold up every green flag triumphantly. You have to be the one who says, yes, that moment was real and the full pattern is also real, and I'm going to hold both without letting one cancel out the other. This is the unglamorous, quiet daily work of rebuilding your inner standard. And speaking of standards, they matter more than people realize. Standards are not ultimatums you hand to other people. They're decisions you make quietly for yourself about what you will and won't participate in. Most people caught in these avoidant dynamics have one thing in common. Their standards existed on paper, but not in daily practice. They said they needed real communication, but stayed through weeks of silence. They said they needed to feel like a priority, but kept showing up as an option. That gap between your stated standards and your lived standards is exactly where avoidant dynamics thrive, because an avoidant person will always find the edge of what you actually prove through your behavior that you're willing to tolerate. So when you finally walk away, you're not just walking away from another person, you're walking away from a version of yourself that once accepted far less than she deserved. You're closing the gap between what you say you need and what you actually live out day to day. And that shift is genuinely transformative, not just within this one relationship, but in every relationship that comes after too. Because here's the real thing about doing this work properly, genuinely doing it, not just as a tactic to win someone back eventually, but as a real lasting commitment to your own growth. You come out the other end as someone fundamentally different, someone who knows herself far more completely, someone who can feel the familiar pull toward the chaos of an avoidant dynamic and consciously choose something else instead. Someone who can spot the early warning signs long before she's 3 years deep and heartbroken all over again. That version of you is worth infinitely more than any single relationship. That version of you is the real goal here. I know all of this might sound somewhat abstract when you're right in the thick of the pain itself. When you're lying awake at 3 in the morning wondering whether they're thinking about you too. When you're drafting texts in your notes app that you never actually send. When you're scrolling their social media, trying to decode meaning out of their silence. When every part of you just wants to reach out, just once, just to see what happens. So let me give you something concrete to hold on to in exactly those moments. Every time you feel the urge to reach out, do something for yourself instead. Not as a punishment, not merely as a distraction, but as a deliberate, conscious act of investing in yourself. Go for a walk, call a close friend, write in a journal, work on something you've been putting off. Do something that actually returns energy back into your own life rather than continuing to drain it towards someone who isn't currently choosing you back. Do this consistently, not because it's guaranteed to bring them back, but because whether they come back or not, you will have built something genuinely real for yourself in the meantime. You will have built real momentum in your own life. You will have filled the space their absence created with things that actually serve and nourish you. And here's what tends to happen after enough time spent doing exactly that. Something genuinely shifts. The desperation slowly starts to lift. Not because you stopped caring entirely, you might still care quite a bit, honestly, but because your own life started mattering more to you than it used to, because you started mattering more to yourself. And from that new place, everything looks noticeably different. You can assess the relationship with far more clarity. You can tell whether someone who's come back around is genuinely showing up differently this time, or simply just showing up again out of habit. You can feel the real difference between authentic change and a temporary recalibration because you are no longer starving for scraps of attention. You are full, and from a place of fullness, you tend to make very different decisions than you did before. I also want to speak directly to something I think matters, especially for women navigating this in their late 30s, 40s and 50s. You have been doing this for a long time now. Not necessarily this exact relationship, but this particular kind of love. This giving, this carrying, this constant managing of other people's emotional worlds on top of your own. You've been told in 100 ways over the years that love inherently requires sacrifice, that if something is truly worth having, it's worth fighting endlessly for, that good things never come easily. And all of those statements carry some grain of truth, but they've also been used against you, woven together into a story that keeps you stuck inside dynamics where you do all the emotional labor and receive very little in return. And at this point in your life, with everything you've already navigated and survived, you genuinely don't have time left for that story anymore. You actually know yourself by now. You've lived enough life to know exactly what you need. You've been through enough to recognize the difference between something difficult in a way that helps you grow and something difficult in a way that slowly diminishes you instead. What you're currently walking through with this person is the second kind, and your instincts already know it. Your body already knows it. You just keep quietly overriding that knowledge with hope instead. Stop overriding it. Trust the version of yourself who already knows the truth here. She's been trying to get your attention for a while now, whispering to you in the quiet moments, in the sleepless nights, in all those gut feelings you kept explaining away. She was never wrong. She never has been. Walking away from someone avoidant is not giving up on love itself. It is not bitterness. It is not shutting yourself off from connection forever. It is genuinely one of the most profound acts of self-love you can commit to. It's saying, I believe I'm worth a love that doesn't require me to constantly convince someone to give it to me freely. I believe real love isn't supposed to feel this hard in exactly this way. I believe there's something better available to me out there, and I'm making real space in my life for it to arrive. That belief, if you can genuinely get yourself there, is the single thing that changes everything going forward. Not just what happens with this one particular person, everything. The way you enter your next conversation with someone new, the way you respond the first time you notice someone pulling back from you, the way you hold on to your own worth in the face of someone testing your boundaries, the way you carry yourself through the entire world because you genuinely changed from the inside out. And that isn't some small tactical shift, that's an entire life shift. So here's what I want you to actually take away from everything we've covered. The avoidant person in your life is not broken beyond any possibility of repair. They are a person carrying deep wounds that cause them to protect themselves in ways that end up hurting the people around them. That is not an excuse for their behavior, but it is real context for understanding it. And understanding that context helps you stop taking it so personally in a way that quietly erodes your own sense of self-worth over time. Their distance is not a verdict on how lovable you are. It's a symptom of their own internal wiring. But, and this is the part you really have to hold on to, your growth, your healing, your happiness, none of that can wait around for someone else to fix their wiring on their own timeline. You do not get to put your entire life on pause while someone else slowly figures out how to love properly. You are worth far too much for that, and your time is far too precious to spend waiting. Walking away is not the end of love. It might actually be the very beginning of the first real, complete love you've ever given fully to yourself. And maybe somewhere down the line, on the other side of your walking away, they actually do the real work. Maybe they get the therapy they need. Maybe they finally confront the exact thing they've been running from their entire life. Maybe they come back as someone who can genuinely show up the way you always deserved. Maybe that happens. Some people really do grow. Some avoidant people genuinely do become more secure once they're faced with real tangible loss. But you cannot walk away while secretly waiting around for that chapter to arrive. You have to walk away for the sake of your own chapter instead. And if their story happens to align with yours again somewhere further down the road, you'll know exactly how to evaluate that possibility from a place of genuine strength rather than desperate need. That's the whole difference, right there. Go build your life now. Go become the full, complete version of yourself. Go love yourself in exactly the way you've been quietly waiting for someone else to love you first. Go do the things that genuinely light you up inside. Go spend time with people who actually pour real energy back into you instead of draining it away. Go remember who you were before this relationship slowly made you start questioning your own worth, because she is still there somewhere inside you, a little tired maybe, a little bruised around the edges, but she is still there, and she is absolutely worth coming back to. That is the real walk away in the end, not away from them, toward yourself.